Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into something pretty big today, the International Transgender Day of Visibility, coming up on March 31st, 2025. And we're looking at it all through this really fascinating article from TATANKA.
Yeah, Tatanka, they're all about love and evolution and how we can build a world without, all this marginalization. And they do it through this really cool mix of music and art and culture.
Right. Music meets mission. I love that.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with this day? I mean, there's so much going on right now. And this article, it starts with this quote by Marsha P. Johnson: "We have to be visible. We should not be ashamed of who we are." It's just so powerful and so relevant, right?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The International Transgender Day of Visibility is about celebration, first and foremost. It's acknowledging the resilience, the courage, the incredible contributions that transgender folks bring to our world. But even more than that, it's about affirming this basic right to exist authentically, openly, without fear, without constantly being questioned.
And that idea of authentic existence, it's like woven into the very fabric of Tatanka. It's not just a talking point for them. Inclusivity is their way of life.
Yeah, totally. It's more than just tolerance. It's about this foundational harmony. Imagine not just different things existing side by side, but actively coming together, these diverse voices and experiences, to create something way richer and more powerful than any one part could on its own. That's what they're all about. Tatanka truly believes that when you celebrate and amplify the full spectrum of human experience, that's how we make real progress.
Makes you wonder, though, what happens when we don't do that? What's the price we pay for not embracing inclusivity? Because Tatanka seems to be saying that exclusion, it's not just this neutral thing, it actually holds us back, and marginalization, well, that pushes us backwards.
That's the thing. They tie this idea into this bigger historical context. Think about it. Any major leap forward, scientific discoveries, artistic revolutions, movements for social justice, they all often came from individuals who were pushing boundaries, people who didn't fit into the neat boxes everyone tried to put them in. And Tatanka's argument is that when you try to suppress identity, you're basically squashing the very things that drive progress.
And Tatanka, they're very clear about where they stand. They express this unwavering solidarity with the transgender community, but not just them. With all groups who have historically been marginalized. They see it all as connected, as essential for us to, I guess, evolve, not just culturally, but intellectually, maybe even spiritually.
And that makes their take on the rising discrimination we're seeing in the U.S., especially right now, even more powerful. They call it out point blank, the stark reality of this new legislation that's specifically targeting the LGBTQIA plus community, and transgender people in particular.
It's scary stuff. They even mentioned Texas, where lawmakers are actually trying to, get this, classify transgender people as felons. I mean, wow, just think about the implications of that.
Oh, it's huge. It's not just, the immediate fear and this threat of being treated like a criminal. It creates this atmosphere of rejection, of dehumanization. It impacts people's access to healthcare, to jobs, to just basic services. It strips away legal protections and further isolates an already vulnerable group. And unfortunately, Texas isn't alone in this. It's part of this wave of discrimination spreading across the country, bans on gender-affirming healthcare, which is essential, restrictions on where transgender individuals can go, what public spaces they can use, and this constant rhetoric that dehumanizes LGBTQIA plus people. It's really concerning.
Kateka, they don't mince words. They see right through these laws. They're not fooled by the guise of protection or whatever. They call them out as deliberate acts of erasure, aimed at preventing transgender people from living openly, safely, and with dignity, with the same basic human dignity everyone deserves.
And they go deeper. They try to understand the roots of this. And they argue that it's often fueled by this cocktail of misinformation and fear, this idea that prejudice is being weaponized, basically, for political gain. And it's the transgender individuals, especially young people, who end up paying the real price. They're already facing so many challenges, higher rates of mental health struggles, and tragically, even suicide. It's heartbreaking.
Tatanka makes this really powerful point. It's not just an attack on one group. It's this bigger attack on basic human rights,
Yeah.
on the freedom to just be who you are. They connect it to this pattern of trying to control people, their bodies, their identities, and it has this, unsettling authoritarian vibe.
It's scary. And yet, in the face of all this, Tatanka has this really compelling response. They talk about meeting hate with what they call radical love and fighting oppression by building these, stronger, more inclusive communities.
Radical love, that's such a powerful phrase. What does that actually look like in action for them?
It's not just a feel-good sentiment, It's about actively choosing empathy. seeking to understand even when it's hard, intentionally building bridges where there's division and hostility. It's about creating space for connection, for recognizing our shared humanity, even when it feels like everything is pulling us apart. And they see themselves as like a living example of this. They're a space where art and culture and advocacy are all intertwined.
They envision a future where, like, the way we measure a person's worth is totally different, right? Where these outdated ideas about gender and identity, they just become irrelevant.
Exactly. They see a future where people are valued for their kindness, for their creativity, for the good they bring into the world, rather than being judged based on these narrow, restrictive ideas about who they should be.
And they're not just dreaming, they're laying out concrete actions to fight discrimination. Like making sure transgender voices are amplified everywhere, in media, the arts, education, even in policymaking. It's about representation at every level.
They also talk about the importance of actively challenging harmful legislation. Voting, making sure the people we elect actually represent these values. Peaceful protests, raising our voices together to demand change. And supporting organizations that are fighting these discriminatory laws in the courts.
Creating safe spaces, places where everyone feels welcome and respected, no matter their gender identity. That's another big one. And of course, education, it can't be overstated. Because so much of the prejudice, it comes from a lack of understanding, right? Knowledge is how we dismantle that ignorance.
It all boils down to this. TATANKA sees this moment as a crossroads. We're at a fork in the road and we have to choose. Do we keep evolving as a society, embracing love, inclusivity, justice for everyone, or do we let fear and hate drag us back into the darkness?
And TATANKA's made their choice clear. They're firmly on the side of progress, on the side of evolution, on the side of love. And they make this important point. International Transgender Day of Visibility is hugely important.
Yeah.
But their commitment to these values goes way beyond a single day.
Their ultimate goal is a future where we don't even need a special day for visibility because equality and acceptance, that's just the norm. It's a world where everyone, no matter who they are, is seen, valued, and free.
And they end that section of the article with this beautiful, hopeful message. This future isn't some unattainable dream. It's something we can build together.
And this leads perfectly into Ioni's story, which TATANKA uses as a powerful example of why visibility matters so much. Ioni, she found comfort in music from a very young age, particularly playing the violin. For her, the instrument was like, it had a voice that was often overlooked, much like her own, but it held so much beauty, so much potential.
But even in music, a world you'd think would be more open and accepting, Ioni has still faced so many barriers, simply because of who she was. Opportunities were limited, and she often felt like people weren't truly listening to her.
It wasn't until she discovered TATANKA's Orchestra Americana that things started to change. This orchestra was different. It wasn't just your typical ensemble. It was this incredible mix of artists, all with their own unique backgrounds and experiences, and they brought all of that into their music.
Even then, when Ioni got the invitation to audition, she must have had some hesitation, right? I mean, after all those experiences with prejudice, it's understandable to wonder if this time would really be different.
But the audition turned out to be this, transformative moment for her. Instead of that wary, judgmental vibe she'd encountered before, she was met with this genuine warmth and encouragement. The conductor, he focused purely on her musical talent, encouraging her to really let her inner voice shine through.
And it's beautiful. After she finished playing, there was this silence. But it wasn't the kind that makes you shrink. It was the kind that says, "We hear you." She became the orchestra's newest violinist, and for the first time, she felt this sense of belonging, like she'd truly found her musical family.
And as they started rehearsing and then went on this national tour, she experienced this firsthand. Music has this incredible power to break down barriers, to connect with people on this deep emotional level, often in ways that laws and fear just can't touch.
And their performance in Texas, especially with all that discriminatory legislation happening there, it became this incredibly powerful statement. Ioni understood that being on that stage, it wasn't just a concert, it was an act of visibility, an act of resistance. And the whole orchestra, they stood with her in solidarity.
That night, she poured everything into her performance. She talked about how her bow arm felt so strong, so resolute, each note like a declaration against those trying to silence her. And after the concert, she had this encounter that really drove home the impact of her visibility.
This young transgender girl, she'd been watching Ioni from the front row, and she got to meet her backstage, and she said something so profound. "I didn't think I'd ever see someone like me up there. Now I think maybe I can be something too.
It was a powerful moment for Ione, this realization that her journey wasn't just about her own experience, but about giving hope to others who felt invisible. She knelt down and told the girl, "You already are something, and no one can take that away from you."
And that wasn't the only time. Throughout the tour, they had so many of these moments. A father who finally accepted his transgender daughter, activists who used their concerts as rallying points to bring their community together. The music was literally opening hearts and minds.
Yeah, by the end of the tour, Ione understood what visibility really meant. It wasn't just about being seen in a single moment. It was about refusing to disappear, about carving out space in a world that tries to erase you. She realized that TATANKA, they were more than just a group of musicians. They were a movement built on shared sound, on unity, and on love.
Ione's story just hits home, doesn't it? It shows that visibility isn't passive. It's this powerful force that creates space and opens up possibilities for others.
It really is. Representation isn't about checking boxes. It's about changing the whole picture, showing people what's possible. When you see yourself reflected in spaces where you were excluded before, it can completely change your sense of self, your sense of what you can achieve.
And in a world where there are people actively trying to erase, silence, even criminalize transgender individuals, TATANKA's message is clear. Don't shrink. Amplify. Take up space, make your presence known, and turn those individual stories into a force for change.
Like Ione found her voice through music, they remind us that each of us has a voice, and we need to find ways to use it. The future belongs to those who speak up, who live authentically, not those who stay silent.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the International Transgender Day of Visibility through TATANKA's message and Ione's incredible story, we really touched on some key ideas here. We explored the meaning of this day, the very real challenges of discriminatory legislation, and the power of visibility of what TATANKA calls radical inclusivity.
Yeah, and TATANKA's unwavering commitment to love, to human evolution, to creating a world where every single person is seen, valued, and free, it's a powerful call to action.
It really is. So one last thought for you to consider. How can you in your own life, in your own way, contribute to building those spaces where every voice is not only heard but truly celebrated, not just on a designated day, but every single day?
Yeah.
What actions can you take, big or small, to create a more inclusive and equitable future for everyone? It's something worth thinking about.